I need to be wearing a North Face jacket and say, are we good to go to start this off? But welcome back from lunch, everyone. Aaron, is this your first X-World presentation as well?
First presentation, yeah.
Yes. So welcome to X-World. Aaron is going to be talking about life cycles of devices. So away we go, Aaron Zanbaka.
Cool. Thanks, Marcus. Thank you, everybody, for coming in. I'm going to probably ask some people some questions. So when I ask opinions, throw up your hand and I'll come over with a microphone. So after the first 20 minutes, it's kind of like a play on the fact that everything people seem to talk about is about onboarding. But if you actually work managing devices or in like an IT team, it's probably not what you're doing most of the time. So, you know, what happens after those first 20 minutes and what do I mean by onboarding? So what I consider as onboarding, if you're thinking about a fresh deployment or if you are working on that new user experience, it's really, you've already made a lot of considerations about how the devices are going to behave in your environment. And it's not like just, okay, we're going to get that zero touch enrollment going. You've probably decided what applications need to be on there. You've decided what policies you need to enforce, and you've worked with the teams around you that have a say in that. So there's a lot of work that happens before those 20 minutes, but then afterwards, where the devices are on your network, in people's hands, and they're doing their day-to-day, there's a lot of work that you've got to do to make sure that that device keeps working, that it doesn't become a huge security risk, and that you have updates happening and all that stuff. So that's what we're going to kind of talk about. And it's going to be pretty, I guess, high level in the concepts, because I'm very aware that there's many people in this room that are a lot smarter than I am and have been doing this for a long time and really know their stuff, which is why I thought it'd be a great opportunity to ask you questions as we go through and hear some, opinions and also some experiences from your sort of own environment or environments you've worked in. So we're going to breeze through what like enrollment looks like. I work for Jamf, so I'm going to show you some Jamf stuff, but your environment could look different and that's totally fine. So we're going to enroll that device. We're going to have like maybe some enrollment customization. With Jamf, I might send out that Jamf Connect stuff happening at the pre-stage. I might also be wanting to tie in managed Apple IDs. If I federated, I might have that notify mechanism come in and give me some user feedback. So if we've got some like endpoint protection that we need on the device before we're going to give someone access to it, we might do that. Get some SSO tied in there, get FileVault activated, and then I might use self-service onboarding to do the rest. So now our users are basically, they've got the device, they've got all the stuff we've already worked on and planned on, and we have a usable machine for them. But now they're using the device, and we've got to make sure that we're looking to the future, working out what are these users going to be doing, and that's where we get together and we kind of think about, all right, we've already done a lot of considerations, but I've rolled out these devices and users are telling me they need different software that we didn't anticipate. And if we've said yes, then we've got to make sure we're maintaining that. Are we going to let our users be admins? And if we are, what are they going to be installing on their devices, and how are we maintaining a report and a nice clear system on that? So these are the things that we need to be looking to make sure that we've got a very successful long-term deployment. And there's some things that we can do that could stifle that. So that's what we want to kind of look at. So I kind of have simplified things into two key pillars, which is management and security. They obviously break out into lots of different things. So I'm just going to give you a very high level of what I'm talking about. And I'm going to ask some questions as well. So if I'm looking at management, there's some tasks that we'll have to do every year. So we've got tokens, if we've got certificates, we're going to have to renew that stuff as well. We've got beta testing, we've got apps that we've got to keep updated. We've also got to package certain things if we've got custom sort of apps that we need to make sure we've got some post install scripts. That might take a bit of work. We've got OS updates and upgrades. That's really important. We want to maintain that user experience. The reason people like to use a Mac is because of that fantastic user experience. We don't want to crush that. So this is the first thing. Is there anything else that you think is really important in management? I wanted to, if anyone's got an opinion, I can hand him a mic, or you reckon that covers most bases? And if it does, it's fine. Cool, all right. So then we jump back and we've got to look at security. So what have we got in there? So I put a lot of different teams kind of in that security bucket, Identity, that's such an integral part of security these days. We've got endpoint protection, so whatever you're using. We've got built-in things in Mac OS. We've also got external tools that we might be having to work with and understanding, how they interact and impact our devices that we're managing. We've got trust, that's a big thing. We've got network security. We've got policies that can be dictated from different sort of subsets of an organization. And we've got reporting, that's a really big one as well. So we've got to know what's going on. We've got to understand that to look to the future and determine what's next. But, we've got these two pillars, and then I think there's a third one that kind of sits a bit separate. So I put that in there as well, and that is compliance. So compliance informs both our management and security sort of approach. It is not something that one determines for the other. We've got these frameworks that might be governed by insurance companies, from the government, and as an organization, we have to adhere to them. You've got different regulatory bodies. So if we're in a financial service institution, we've probably got more stringent rules around what we're doing and more sensitive data than we do if we're a school. And we've also got different considerations if we're a school, because if we're looking at K to 12, our users are doing very different things to, someone at a bank, as an example. So there's lots of teams that are involved in all this as well. And, we've got our management team, which is like looking at that end user compute and that experience and the long-term sort of health of our devices. Security, we've got InfoSec, we've got a bunch of other teams across network, and then we've got compliance. So we've got to really think about these things when we're making decisions. One team, if you decided to decide everything, you're probably going to have someone knocking on your door and saying, hey, no, we've got these other responsibilities and you can't do that. So if we understand where all the teams are and what they are responsible for, it really helps us look to that long-term success of our deployment. But there's one important thing, and that is that management really underpins those other two sort of elements. So our security teams can have all of the reporting and everything going on, but if it's not enforced on the devices, then it's not going to do anything. And then our compliance that we've decided, what are we going to enforce? What rules are we going to follow? What baselines, benchmarks? That is that next step, and we do need management to enforce that as well, unless we're going to trust our users to just have everything in line with what we've set. So there's a few considerations and a few teams, and we're going to look at that, and we're going to look at what can define success and what could stifle success as well. So, I had a bit of fun with DALL-E and ChatGPT doing these images. So we've got these teams that have to work together, and they make captain management, or whatever you want to call it. So I thought that was a bit of fun. Yeah. I loved it. I love what it does with weird words. So we've got these teams that have to work together, and then as we move forward, we've got the ability to have very successful deployment. And I think a lot of it comes with communication, understanding, and it can be hard because we siloed teams, like talking to the person who looks after someone's Azure environment. They're probably so separated from the Mac admin, and it's a difficult thing. So, these are different battles, but we're talking high level. We're not talking about reality here necessarily. So we'll go through. So we know, all right, we've got these teams that we've got to interact with. We've got a bunch of other considerations across management, security, and then there's like subsections within those. So it can be pretty complicated. And I think I like to break it down into like a couple of different categories. So a few, I guess. So I've got what I plan to do. So that's like my scheduled or routine tasks. So that's going to be like roadmap items, app deployment, patching software, infrastructure that I know is happening, infrastructure changes. Then I've got what I need to do, and they're the reactive tasks. So I think compliance for a lot of people that I talk to over the last 12 months especially, was a bit of a reactive task. Everyone was like, hey, we've got to be Essential 8 compliant. And then they didn't know what Essential 8 compliant was. They didn't know what the maturity model or where they needed to sit. And so now that's part of the, what I plan to do. It's just that scheduled routine. But it was a sort of, hey, we've got to get this sorted very quickly. But then there's also what I should be doing, which I would put in like beta testing, updating workflows, and auditing and things like that. That's really important to that long-term success. You need to know what you've got to update. Apple keep giving us amazing stuff every dub that we go and we work through, we test out, we understand. And then hey, we've got to update those workflows and enforce them or test them to understand how they're going to impact us for better or for worse. Or are they right for us? And they're all the decisions that you've got to make within your organization, but you can only do that if you have the time to actually test. So that's what we want to kind of provide, is like a healthy deployment long-term that gives you that ability to test. So we've got our Mr. Manager here. So if management's underpinning everything, we've got these like most important aspects of management, I want to know what tools or processes will help or hinder your deployment. So I know that there's some strong opinions in this room about different elements of this. So I do want to ask, has anybody got something that they think is mission critical to the success of their deployment, or something that really stifles what they've done, either being new in an organization and taking over someone's environment, or updating workflows that they had sort of implemented a long time ago? Anybody? We've got the 7 seconds, and I'm cool with quiet, so. All right. I'm surprised. I did expect some, So I've got a couple of opinions on this, so I might as well share mine. So I think you're going to have complex environments. There's things that are going to be complicated depending on the industry you're working in, but I think over-engineering an environment is a massive hindrance to your long-term success. You might have a problem that you need to solve, and you spend a lot of time engineering it, and then it comes time, maybe you get a promotion, maybe you move to a different organization, maybe you have a new person start and you want to offload responsibilities, you want to go on a holiday, right? If you've over-engineered it, that can really stifle, the ability to hand off work, train up new staff members, even decipher what you did, like why did I make those decisions? They're really important things. So if you are going to do some over-engineering, what do you think is something that's very important to? Yeah, document. So yeah, documentation. And that is probably one of the most important things you can do. Because has anybody, who built their own environment? Okay, cool. So you see a few hands. Who took over someone else's environment? All right, cool. So the people that took over someone else's environment, would you make those same decisions if you were to build it from scratch? So there's a lot of no's, all right? So I think that's pretty consistent. Yeah, burn it down, start again. That's one option. But hey, what happens if you're really worried that if you delete this one thing, you're going to completely break the whole environment? Because that happens. And yeah, so like the burning it down and starting again, that's great. But if you do, and you break everything, it's your responsibility. So that's where documentation can fill in a few of those gaps. So this is my sort of image that I had that I thought was great about if you document, you can go on a holiday and you can train up that new staff member. Maybe it's an intern, maybe it's someone that's coming into the organization, and they can understand what's going on and they can help move things forward with you. So that is really a crucial element. I think over-engineering is probably the main thing that you want to avoid. But also, if we look at what Apple give us every year, if we're having things naturalized into the MDM framework and it's a profile that we did have some scripts or something doing, it's much better to do it as a profile. It's then supported, it's getting updated, and we get new capabilities, and we don't have to rely on a script. So that's just one example. But that one example probably applies to 50 things people are doing in an organization. So very, very important. If you have an overcomplicated environment as well, you can see this Mr. Manager of management, he's a bit dated, right? He's stuck in the past. So we want to bring him a decade forward. So we want to bring him into the future, or a future. And that's going to allow you to implement some stuff. So, if we look at what Apple have given us, I think that declarative device management is something that's going to be really fundamental to how we're looking to the future. So you want to make sure that you've got the ability to update certain workflows and you don't have to rely on things that you have done in the days of yore. So I am just going to make a little edit so I can see this next slide. All right, here we go. That work? We'll press play. There we go. Cool. So I wanted to like share some things that are probably used in environments, and I'm very open to hear what you're doing. You know, Bart, you probably heard Swift Dialog get referenced a lot. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's a tool that I don't know. I know very few organizations aren't using it that need to communicate with their end users. It makes it simple. It allows you to make sure someone sees what you're doing to their device, and part of that end user experience they want to preserve. This is a really great tool to help you with your management. If you're making a change, something that might be a little bit different, behavior is going to be different on the device, this is a really great way for you to leverage it. And you can do it for not just that, anything that you need, anything that the InfoSec, if they're making a change, they can come to you and say, hey, can you communicate this to our end users as well? And so you can work with those teams to deliver that messaging, which is really important. So app deployment. Did I skip one? No? Okay. No, so we've got app deployment. So you might be using like auto package. Otherwise, you could, if I work for Jamf, so I might use the app catalog that we've got. So that allows me to deploy out apps and keep them up to date. For things that aren't in there, I might have my software titles that I want to keep patched. So I've got that patch repository. I can do custom titles in there as well. But then the most important thing to remember is we've got the ability through Apple Business Manager, Apple School Manager to keep our App Store apps deployed and up to date. And that really simplifies that. So there's a lot of tools that you've got to keep app deployment simple. I know that, in the Jamf app catalog, for instance, we've got like 174 titles there. So that's a bunch of them that they're titles that aren't on the App Store that you can use. But then the App Store's got so many applications that you might want to manage. And then there's other things that you can package up yourself and deploy to your end users. So if you can remove the need to maintain a huge subset of packages, you're going to buy back a lot of time, and you'll be able to simplify your like sort of daily requirements and those scheduled and routine tasks, and give yourself more time for that beta testing and stuff that we need to do. We've also got the PPPC utility. We've got Kmart right now, sorry. So that is a tool that Nindy Gill's made that, if you're using Jamf, is going to give you the ability to see and report on what policies and things are not being used in your environment, so you can clean it up. Because if someone's taking over an environment or looking to do things, and you've got a bunch of redundant policies, then hey, why don't we clean that up? And that's going to make things much more simple for myself and anybody else that's going to be maintaining that environment. One of the other things you can do is like categories. If you're like maintaining like how organized you are, don't overcomplicate it, but keep them up to date. Don't have everything like non-categorized, because that can make it really hard to filter through. So yeah, here we've got the PPPC utility. Doesn't matter what MDM you are. Seems like everybody uses this. We need those. So InfoSec might rely on you to have that, so you can get those security tools down. Or you might have anything that you need to make sure that that's active, because we don't want to guide the end user through that. That creates a bad user experience. And then we've got software updates. So we've got, I can do it through declarative, through Jamf Pro, or I might want to communicate to my users with Nudge or Super. So they're two ways that you can get some feedback and let your users know, I want you to do the update, rather than me having to force it. So that brings us on to our sort of security side of things. Actually, before we talk about security, does anybody have any other tools that you'd like to recommend to the wider audience? Yeah, I got a few. What was it? Installamator, absolutely. That's a big one.
Pretty much anything Leslie makes.
Anything Leslie makes is what McMoney's has said, so there you go. Prune? All right, cool. So there's, so much that you can like look to, and that's what I love about conferences like this, is that you get to be part of a community, and there's so many people that make things available. And then there's organizations that provide tools that you can use as well that might be paid. And it's just working out what's right for you and your environment. I would say don't turn everything on. That's kind of going to be a theme for making sure you can have a healthy deployment, because the more things you've got, the more complicated you make your environment. Determine what you need and what's going to benefit you. But yeah, there's a huge set of amazing tools that you can leverage. So, it brings us to security. We've got our InfoSec guy, and they're saying, we need to do these things, and we also need you to get them onto the device, right? So I kind of look at this as the best way you can work with InfoSec is to communicate, justify, understand what they're wanting to achieve, but justify where your stance is if you know that you've got a very healthy environment and you can enforce these things. We can't necessarily apply Windows logic to Apple devices, and that's really important, and I think that's where better conversations can be had. And then you might have to compromise, but that's just part of it. Because we've kind of gone back to that user experience. Like, I know I love using my Apple devices because that end user experience is fantastic, and I don't want to compromise that. But there might be things, again, based on the industry that you're in, that mean there are compromises that have to be made, and you've got to basically know where to make those compromises so you don't ruin that experience completely, but you can ensure that your organization is meeting the standards that's required of them. So this is kind of like, if we did leave it up to InfoSec and the things that they wanted to do, we might have something like this, right? So you might have a machine that's in a cage and we can do very little on it. That is where that communication really comes into play. And there's ways that you can work with them to benefit their sort of end goals and meet your own. So we've got a couple of tools here, but before I do that, anybody got anything that they think is really important to articulate or work with InfoSec on?
Understanding Macs.
Yeah. Look, understanding Macs is definitely something.
Understanding Apple full stop.
Yeah. There's if any of you have needed to train someone up about understanding Apple devices in general, we've got the Jamf 100, which has got free online course material, but then we've also got the 170, which is built on the security side of things, and you can have that material available, and you can just send that to anybody on your security team or in your own team to understand how security works on a Mac and those decisions that Apple have made from the start to the end that goes through the hardware, through the software, and it's not afterthought. It's very much integral to how Apple devices are made. And that's really important if you are articulating to a security team, what do we want to achieve? Well, let's understand what we can do on these Apple devices or how they're built first so that you can understand how to apply the goals that you've got to these devices and not treat them the same as the other devices that you're already familiar with. Yeah?
I found one of the best ways to get security on board is to give...
Wait, I'm going to give you the microphone.
I'm just going to yell it out.
No, because so the recording can hear.
Oh, for the recording.
Yeah.
Sorry, James. I found that one of the best ways to get security and compliance teams on board with what you're trying to do is to give every one of those people a Mac. Give them a device and let them experience that. And then when they go, oh, this is really nice, I want to keep doing this, I like using this, you get them on board, and it's much easier to sell them on what you want to do and trade off between security, compliance, experience, and where that meets if they've got devices they can use all the time.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And, for battery life alone, I went away for a week and I didn't have to charge my Mac, and I was like, wow, this is nice. So, yeah, anybody else got anything that they wanted to share? No? All right, cool. So we've got a couple of tools that I think are really great ways that you can work with your security teams because they're going to tie into maybe the things that they want to do. So What's Your Sign, Objective-C, this really great tool to just understand what you're working with, understand that hash information that you've got from the applications you might want to run or not run, depending on how regulated your industry is. This is just a really simple tool to use. We've got Aftermath, so that's going to give you some forensic analysis of what happened on a device and let you really break down what went on and then work with your InfoSec team to really pinpoint, whether it's through testing or through an actual incident, what's happened. We might have our security tools, whether it's on the network front or on our endpoints. And then we might want to work with InfoSec to pass that through to something like our SIEM or a data lake or whatever, so we can leverage that data to really understand what is going on in the environment and give them visibility into what's happening on those endpoints. So we've got compliance now. our compliance manager, whatever that means. Just someone that is, I think, in Australia, we've got the Essential 8, like I mentioned before. And so a big part of that is, all right, we've got all these people that are saying we've got to meet certain criteria, we've got to be this maturity level. And then, Winston's talk before he went through, and we could turn on all the rules, but we would have that Mac in a cage. We'd actually probably have a potato because we couldn't do anything with the device if we turned everything on. So there's the biggest sort of thing, the best thing you can do when you're looking at compliance is understand what is relevant for your organization, because you can't apply the same logic to every organization. If you're a school, you're never going to be maturity level 3 because that's impossible. If you're any organization, you probably have to make those decisions, and you might have different users that meet different maturity models, and that helps you frame what compliance looks like in your organization. There's lots to consider here, but that's just like the high level sort of feedback I would give from the organizations that I'm working with daily. It's just understand what's right for you and what makes sense for you as an organization. And then you've got tools that you can use. So this has been talked about a fair few times so far at XWorld, and there's a good reason for that. We've got the macOS Security Compliance Project. This is fantastic. It gets updated. It's got iOS, macOS, and there's lots of ways you can leverage it. This doesn't matter what tooling you're using, you can leverage this. So that's there. Apple have documentation of it on their website. So it's not just some Git repo that you're going to go and do things with. It's recognized, and that means that you should probably look into it if you haven't. If you're wanting to map against the Essential 8, CAS have like a kind of high-level guide as well around leveraging CAS V8 to map against the Essential 8. So that's useful. If you've been tasked, like, I've got to do this, how do I approach it? How do I work with InfoSec to do this? Well, hey, you can leverage these guides to help you understand it better. And then, we've got the establishing compliance baselines, which has that Jamf compliance editor, which Winston did a session on before. That'll just show you how to take those rules, the ones that you might make edits to as well, to meet those exceptions that you need to have in your organization, and then upload them as reportable, enforceable policies and profiles, and then also have that guidance so that you've got that documentation you can give to insurance providers or security or whoever, so you've got that documentation that represents what you've done and the reasons why. Then, actually, before we go into this, is there anybody that's got anything they wanted to share about compliance and how that's looked for them as an organization? I'm sure most of you have had to deal with it in some capacity.
Most important part of compliance.
Marcus, yeah. Turn it on, it needs to get turned on.
Sorry, James. The most important part I've found of establishing those compliance baselines is having a conversation with the teams, rather than just asking them what rules they want and then applying them. Is actually that sitting down and socializing what you're trying to do, what these rules actually mean, taking them from words in that compliance document and then bringing that back to the user experience and then the risk of that. And I've seen with organisations not doing that, they end up with a set of arbitrary rules that really aren't achieving anything.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And that's where I think that communication and that understanding so that you can plan long-term together, because it was very reactionary for a lot of organisations, like, I have to do this. We've got a cyber assessment, or we've got insurance coming up, and we need to make sure that we're meeting these requirements without fully understanding it. And without that full understanding, and without that communication with the different teams that needed to happen, or were dictating that we've got to do it, then it left a lot of people kind of wondering, how do I approach that? And maybe not implementing those controls in like the best way they could have. So we've kind of touched on these different topics, and then one of the big ones, which I really think deserves its own category, is beta testing. And this is in that, what we should be doing. We know that dub's coming up, right? So we know that we're going to get some information, and we've got to make sense of what does that mean for our organization? What does that mean for the work that I'm doing? How do I make sense of this and implement it, right? So that's one of the great things about conferences like this is we've got people we can talk to about that, and we can understand their thoughts, and we can also, understand from vendors as well, what does that look like for you? It's too early now to know what happens next, so we've got to wait. But the main things that we need to do is we've got to provide feedback, right? And we do that through the appropriate channels, and we give our feedback in the right ways. So who runs all the betas and tests their devices every year? Cool. I thought I'd see more hands, but there's a reason for that. It's because it's hard. You got to find time to do it, right? And but the benefit for you is that you don't have to defer updates potentially for as long. You can be sure that, cool, I'm ready to move on with what I've got next if I've tested this out. So when it comes time for release day, production release day, I can let my devices update, or I don't have to defer for as long as I traditionally would. Because after 90 days, those users can do the updates, right? Unless you want to be really heavy-handed in preventing them from doing it, you want to make sure that you can let your end users update, and that preserves that user experience. One of the ways you can work with your MDM provider, so I can't speak for everybody, but I know at Jamf, you can get a beta instance that you can test. You can provide feedback to us as well, so you test new features. One of the cool new things is it doesn't have to be rebuilt when you're testing, it'll just continue on, so that's very useful. But yeah, provide feedback through the right channels to Apple, Jamf, or your MDM provider, and understand what that looks like. This is something that's really cool that was recently announced, I think everyone should kind of look to, and that's the beta management. So you're going to be able to designate your beta devices, the beta testing devices, so that you can then just have them get the beta version instead of having to go through that two-step process. So this is really cool, and that's going to save you a lot of time. And that's the stuff we're looking to, so we've got more time to do those things that we need to in our environment. Mac admin Slack. So one of the really important things is when you're providing feedback, part of your terms and conditions is that you're not talking about them in public channels. So there's a workflow here under your Appleseed in the Mac admin Slack that gives you the instructions for what to do to get invited to that channel. Yeah, so James is who you'll be talking to. But remember, the most important rule of beta channels is you don't talk about them outside of beta channels. They stay in the beta channels. So that's like, my Fight Club reference of, but yeah, you've got to make sure that you're not taking things out, because part of your terms and conditions is that you're not sharing them publicly because it's beta, they're not production features. So that's really, really important. So before we kind of wrap it up, there is two things that you should just have bookmarked at all times and constantly reference. And that's the platform deployment guide and the platform security guide. I think that they are just constantly referencing them. So that's something that if you want to understand more in depth, you go there, and that's what you can break down and kind of get that good sense. So kind of if you do those things, the idea is, we'll be super successful long term. It's all good in theory. I can stand up on my soapbox and tell you this stuff. I understand that every environment's different, but it is definitely like, if you think about things and maybe change the way that you're thinking about things or approaching different elements of management and security within your organization, it's going to really help you look to the future and plan for that healthy environment, plan for that healthy sort of life cycle of your devices as well. And it gives you the ability to approach and sort of pivot when you need to. So yeah, that's pretty much everything I've got. If there's anything that anyone wants to share though, we can, if we've got time, I don't know, are we over time? We've got time. So is there anything that anybody's got some thoughts on about how this relates to your environment, how it relates to past environments? I'd be really curious to hear.
What happened to the hands?
Oh yeah, that's AI. Doesn't do hands well.
So I just want to loop back to the struggling with security teams thing. One of the things I found super helpful was actually getting AJ from Apple involved. Mm-hmm. He sort of just walked in the door and blew everybody away. So that was actually super useful in getting a lot of this stuff through that I've found.
Look, that's something that I am super beneficial. I benefit from all the time. Is that we've got some amazing people working at Apple that are really willing and passionate about what they're doing to share their knowledge. So I think that if you've got those questions, that's what you should be looking to. And actually, you just reminded me, in the Mac admin Slack and those channels, you've got people from Apple in there that are there to help you. Be nice to them. They're going through this at the same time. Very, very important. You know, they're there to help you. It's not something that they're not looking for abuse. They're looking for feedback that they can then take to their teams and implement. So that's really important as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
And sorry, one other thing. I think the platform security guide got updated like last night.
I just took those screenshots before I got on stage, so it hasn't been updated on there yet, but yeah.
It's still being localized for Australia.
Yeah. That's it, more swear words. Anybody else?
Hush. No, just a question of who's Lindsay and what do they make? You said earlier. Oh, Leslie. Oh, Big Rat. Okay, cool.
Can I actually go back a few slides and pull up the Swift dialog one so I can take a picture of it and tell work that it's it's worth my time.
Did I go past it? There we go.
Stand in front of it and I'll take your photo.
Oh my God.
While Bart's there, you may or may not have.
The Tim pose.
Wait. While Bart's on stage, we'll give him the manila envelope because I did my dodgy Steve Jobs dress today, so you get a Jamf t-shirt. There you go.
Release an app every 3 years.
Yeah. No problems. Anybody else? All right, cool. Well, look, I'll go back to that. This is my favorite image, that InfoSec one. But yeah, like I think that we've got a really great community in Australia. It's something that I definitely don't take for granted, and I think that conferences like this is super important. And yeah, like Mac admin Slack is a really great way to like talk to people. But things like this, you can't put a price on it. So thanks everyone for having me, and I hope you have an excellent conference for the rest of XWorld. And yeah.
Thank you very much, Aaron.